All right. There we go. Good morning. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our session on the Stuff in Flux 2 study, the second of the Greater Vancouver Circular Economy Network 6-part series. Please note, as I said before, the first part of this session is being recorded. Please remain off camera and submit any questions into the chat function if you do not wish to be recorded. And the breakout rooms that we will be doing later in the session will not be recorded. My name is Alice, and I am a program manager at the Share, Reuse, Repair Initiative. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional and unceded territories of the Squamish, the Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, First Nations, lands on which I'm joining from today. Our audience today encompasses a much broader area, and we would like to encourage you to introduce yourself in the chat and acknowledge the First Nations land where you are located. Thank you in advance. I'll hand it over to Maria, our co-host.
Thanks, Alice. My name is Maria. I am an analyst in circular economy at the Vancouver Economic Commission. This 6-part series is a collaboration between the VEC and the Share, Reuse, Repair Initiative, powered and supported by Vancity. As the economic development agency for the City of Vancouver, VEC contributes to building a prosperous, inclusive, zero carbon and resilient Vancouver economy. And we do that through various projects and programs. From VEC today, we have myself and Krista Clay, who is our manager in circular economy. Krista, I don't know if people can see you, but you can give everyone a wave. Really looking forward to today's session. And yeah, back over to you, Alice.
Thanks, Maria. The Share, Use, Repair Initiative, or SRRI, brings together government, business, and community innovators to build a culture of economy of sharing, reuse, and repair in the Greater Vancouver region in order to prevent waste, support lighter living, and enable circular innovation. Rosemary Cooper, our director, is joining us today in addition to myself, and you'll be hearing from her more this session. Rosemary, again, I'm not sure how many people can see you, but please give everyone a wave. Vancity is a cooperative financial institution committed to supporting its members and the communities they live in, and to leverage all its assets to support a transition to a low-carbon, resilient economy that works for everyone. We are grateful to Vancity for powering the GVCEN series. This 6-part series has been designed to enable knowledge sharing around specific circular economy topics of the most interest to our local circular business community. The circular economy is an economic model that extends the life cycle of products by keeping products and materials at their highest value and utility for as long as possible. Throughout this process, waste is eliminated through the reduction, reuse, repair, and recycling of materials to limit inefficiencies and close gaps within the system. Reusing materials results in a parallel reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and other environmental impacts, increased innovation, and the opportunity for significant cost reductions. In every session, you'll hear from subject matter experts and local businesses leading the way in our local circular economy, and be invited to ask questions directly to them. In the second half of each session, you'll join breakout rooms where everyone is invited to share their challenges, questions, and insights on the topic of the day. Every session, we will note learnings and resources shared. This morning, we'll learn from one another about the Stuff in Flux 2 Global Consumer Insights Study. From today until February, we'll get together approximately once a month. The series is scheduled as follows. Last month, we had a session on integrating inclusive employment in circular business. You can find that recording on our website. In November, we'll have 2 sessions on carbon accounting. In January, we'll look at accessing and assessing R&D, and in February, growth and export beyond Vancouver's boundaries. We've set the schedule so that we can adapt each session by incorporating learnings from the previous session. We want this to be as beneficial for you as possible. With that, I'd like to introduce Rosemary Cooper, the project director of SRRI, to get our session started. For 25 years, Rosemary has been advancing sustainable solutions, with the last 10 focused on catalyzing the transition to a circular economy, emphasizing upstream solutions that design out waste, enable circular living, and support positive business innovation. She has a passion and talent for bridging the gap between ideas and solutions through strategy, insightful research, effective messaging, and facilitating innovation processes that bridge across silos and sectors. In addition to her role as project director of the Share, Use, Repair initiative, Rosemary teaches the circular economy to the next generation of business leaders at the British Columbia Institute of Technology, or BCIT. And with that, over to you, Rosemary.
Thanks so much, Alice. Yeah, really excited to be talking to you today about Stuff in Flux 2. It's really a global insight study that's shining a strategic light on consumer goods innovation and making a strong business case for circular goods and services. And it really started in 2016, about 5-6 years ago now, with a key question: is our relationship to stuff changing? Next slide. And the answer, quite simply, was yes. And what we found is that leading edge consumers have complex post-material values expressed in 4 disruptive innovation territories with mass market potential. And while these insights guided circular innovation in 7 countries, Canada wasn't included, which is something that personally bothered me, because I thought Canadian businesses are missing out on future-proofed innovation opportunities, and Canadian consumers aren't having access to the many goods and services that they likely wanted given these global trends. So when we learned that Alice Labs, and Oskar is here today, I'll introduce him soon, the global management consultants who developed the Stuff in Flux leading edge methodology were planning round 2, I knew that the Canadian market needed to be included. Next slide. So we formed a really dynamic team to bring it to Canada. Share, Reuse, Repair joined forces with Lindsey Boyle, founder of Circular Citizen. Give a wave, Lindsey. And of course, we had to have support and collaboration with Alice Labs. Say hi, Oskar. I'll introduce you more later. Who are the global project team leaders and the founder of that Stuff in Flux leading edge methodology. We also got advice from Paul Shorthouse, and thankfully, Canadian Tire showed their circular economy leadership by stepping up as the sponsor, allowing key members of their C-suite from Canadian Tire, but also Marks and Sport Tech to join us on the journey to learn about and discuss the insights as they emerged. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Oskar Korkman of Alice Labs, and he's going to give us some history about Stuff in Flux and the methodology used in the project. So Dr. Oskar Korkman is the co-founder of Alice Labs Partner. He's a market strategist and works with commercial, public, and nonprofit organizations in Europe and the Americas to develop new approaches to explore market strategies and business models for growth in sustainable ways. And before co-founding Alice Labs Partner, Oskar was director of consumer intelligence at Nokia and consumer evangelist, great term, at Microsoft. He has 15 years plus of experience in global research, as well as turning insights into business decisions. He has a master's in education, a PhD in marketing focused on ethnographic research and innovation. And with that impressive background, I hand it over to Oskar.
Thanks a lot, and thanks for inviting me to this event. I'm delighted to be here, and greetings from Helsinki in Finland, where I'm sitting right now. So as Rosemary told you, this was a project that was started already in 2016. So basically me and my colleagues have been studying this very simple question about how is our relationship to things changing. And the project didn't actually start as a sustainability initiative, but then as we were working on this, we increasingly understood that the expectation is actually different forms of circular and sustainable solutions for the future. Our intent from the start was threefolded. So we have developed a methodology that we call leading edge methodology, where we are understanding the future through the lens of a specific part of the population globally. And this is our window to the future. So by studying these so-called leading edge people around the globe, we believe that we can predict and see how things are going to move in the next 3 to 5 years or so. Originally, also, this was arranged as a multi-client project where we had 4 global consumer brands involved, and And we involved also the kind of top leadership from these companies to explore this together as a journey into the lives of people and how they see things in the future. The third thing that we also had as a principle is that we don't only want to do exploration and learning about new opportunities. We also want to measure things and also assess the pace of change that we can expect globally, and in this case also for Canada. So that was the starting point. Next slide. I mentioned already that the methodology that we have applied for the research that we will go through today also is based on something which we call leading edge. And leading edge is a specific part of the population that we have developed an algorithm over time to identify the types of people and the individuals globally that are the first to adopt new lifestyles or new ways of doing things. And by this lens of the leading edge, we are getting knowledge about newness. As said, this is the window to the future for us. And when we're talking about the leading edge, we are not thinking about this as a target group for businesses, and that's not the point of our presentation today. This is purely a methodology in terms of being able to anticipate the future and see what is coming. Next slide. And then before I let Rosemary go through the findings, I'm going to just talk very quickly through like the methodology that we have used, because that's kind of important to also understand that these findings that will be presented are not random observations. They are based on a very robust research process. So in this case, we gathered again for the Chapter 2 that was now done last year. We gather again a group of 5 different parties, and we scoped the project together. What we did then was that we were in 4 different markets, including then Canada. We were engaging hundreds and hundreds of hours with the so-called leading edge to a qualitative exploration. We were actually talking with these people first for, if I remember, 4 hours, and then we still spent 3 hours again with each individual, and we explored altogether 60 people around the globe. Then after that, we took this into a quantification exercise, and the reason why we have the quantification is that we don't want to bring findings to the table that is only based on research on this specific segment of leading edge. But what we are doing is that we're using the quantification to see how this plays out in the broad population of different nations. So, and then we're basically excluding everything that doesn't have a mass market potential in the next 3 to 5 years. So that's the point with quantifications. We're actually looking at the whole population of Canada in this case. And then the 4th phase is that we have then separately been involved in different initiatives around the globe, including this one, to then turn these insights into applications and learnings and new innovation for the involved companies. Next slide. As a part, just as an example, as a part of the qualitative phase, we were engaging also people in something that we called hackfests. That's after the qualitative research, we actually invited the leading edge to take part in this kind of workshop settings where we are developing ideas around future goods with them. These pictures are actually from the first round, because now we did it in the midst of COVID. So we're actually running these workshops online in Stuff in Flux Part 2. Next slide. And then just showing, these are also examples from the first round. What we did was that we took the opportunities we identified through qualitative exploration, started to measure the development potential for these opportunities. In this case, this is an image from a report where we're identifying a certain opportunity territory, which had a to do with mobility in 2016. And then we were measuring about and giving indications of what is the pace of change within this specific opportunity. So that's very briefly about the methodology, and we can, in the Q&A session, I can answer more questions if you have any of the methodology. Yes, then before I let Rosemary loose, a couple of points on what we are seeing, and these are like the global evolutions that we are seeing. So from a 7-market study where we are kind of looking at this from a global perspective. Interesting thing is with our study is that we have 2 data points. So we have done this in 2016, and now we have done it in 2021. So we can actually see evolutions. There are actually quite radical evolution since 2016. Overall, a huge increase in engagement in sustainability and an aspiration to curb consumption. There is also something that was, I think, the most exciting for us is that we have been talking for a long time about circular consumption, but consumers haven't been talking about circular consumption. So we saw really clear signs of consumers around the globe having the idea of consumption and ownership being temporary. So something that if you own something, it doesn't mean that you own it forever. It's the end point of the process. They are seeing themselves as a kind of almost like a custodian of products that then will have a life afterwards. We're also seeing an idea about sufficiency, that people around the globe actually see consumption and a time of consumption where enough is enough. And that might be a quite trivial thing to say, but it's actually an important global finding because that wasn't the case in 2016. Overall excitement relating shopping and buying new things is clearly going down. And maybe not a surprise for us in this community, but there is a continuous increased search for brands that aligns with one's own values and does positive things and in society and the planet. And one part of this finding is also that consumers around the globe are not expecting companies to move from A to B overnight, but they're actually expecting companies to have a direction and work towards that direction, even if the steps would be small. Thank you. And over to you, Rosemary.
Thanks so much, Oskar. Well, I'm really excited now to share with you the 4 strategic opportunities with mass market potential that have evolved out of the Stuff and Flux project here in Canada. You'll see that we have 2 of them called Useful Stuff and Joyful Stuff that are the most established in the here and now. And then we emerge to those, stuff connecting to nature, and then flowing stuff that are still in the here and now, but they're a little bit more emergent in nature. And you'll see what I mean as I share the qualitative and quantitative findings. Next slide, please. So the first territory I'd like to share with you is called Useful Stuff. And in fact, this is the one that is most established in Canada. And Canada is comparable to other global markets for useful stuff. So this is similarly very established globally. Next slide. So here are some of the attitudes and behaviors related to useful stuff. And it's really this overarching concept of getting value from use, not possession. So judging usage over time. Even before purchasing things, consumers are asking themselves, are they going to be valuable to me over time? And perhaps even declining or delaying that purpose when they're not convinced. And really wanting to find the things in their life not burdensome. Wanting to know, getting bothered if feeling if things are not in use and feeling weighed down by them, which can actually make acquiring things a little bit challenging. But also seeking convenience when you actually own things. Convinced that will be used over time, won't become a burden, and that you're given support in its use. It's actually easy to own. Next slide. So useful stuff, as you can see here, is the most established in Canada. What this actually means is that right now we have a core sort of mass market at 37% of those that very highly resonate with this innovation territory or opportunity space. This is essentially the here and now with some pent-up demand if the services and goods are not available. But then we have this other one called the consumption pool, which is at 63%. And this includes all of those who resonate very highly. And this is really the next step on. And I like to think of this or think of this as the midterm future. And you can think of this at a kind of up to 5 years, maybe 5 to 10 years out. So it's coming soon. Next slide. Before I move on to that, what I think is important, if you could go back to the previous slide, is this one is there's modest resonance amongst it's modestly more important for slightly older generations. You can see, but it's pretty level. But as we go to boomers, they actually are resonating with useful stuff territory more than the Gen Zs are at the other end of the scale. Next slide. So this innovation territory leads to a bunch of questions, design questions that we should ask in order to enhance value and use over time and to kind of create timeless aesthetics. So we need to ask ourselves, how can we help people judge this long-term use right up front at purchase? Can we find ways to help people try things out without committing to making the purchase? Can we build in repairability and care so it becomes a choice criteria? And can we reassure people that long-term use for them will be convenient and supported? Next slide. So I wanted to share a few examples, and I'm sure you can think of many more. So one of them is the Always pan. I don't know if you guys have heard of this. It's like an internet sensation, and it really is this pan where they're saying it's 8 uses in one. It's designed for everything and for always. So this is a language of use that they're conveying in their marketing, and it's designed for many versatile uses, 8 of them in fact, and it's really durable. Here's another opportunity where Canada Goose has these cold rooms that allows customers to try on and build confidence in their winter clothing before they buy it, making sure that their winter clothing works and is useful and is going to work for them in a really cold room, because that's where they're going to be stepping out to in many parts of Canada. Next slide. And so finally, a nice, great, example with an office right here in North Vancouver is Arc'teryx's Rebird initiative that they launched in 2021. Has lots of different components that you could say support long-term use without burden. So they have the Recare program that supports customer use of their gear over time through care and repair services. I believe they've just opened a Rebird service center actually in a Toronto store. You can get your Gore-Tex leak text, you can get hands-on education about product care, you can get zipper repair, Gore-Tex fabric replacement, and if your gear requires something more significant, they'll actually send it off to the ARC1 factory in Vancouver. So you really have this sense that you're going to be supported in the use of that gear that you buy. And then there's also the Regear trade-in and resale hub that really is about getting that gear back in action. And knowing this option exists for consumers reduces the psychological burden of ownership for customers right up front. So this is really just a great example of useful stuff. And from a practical business perspective, it provides a circular story of footprint reduction and a new revenue stream for selling that clothing again. So there's useful stuff. I'm excited now to hand it over to Lindsey Boyle to talk about the next 2 territories, which are joyful stuff and stuff connecting to nature. So Lindsey, for more than 20 years, has advised global brands like Whole Foods, Google, Kraft, The North Face, and Netflix, lots of brands that we know. And at Circular Citizen, she's fueling the widespread adoption of circular business models, empowering organizations to grow their audience, earnings, and impact. She's really passionate about helping partners gain confidence in the potential of circular business models, reuse, resale, repair, rental, and regenerate so they can reach their net zero goals. She uses consumer insight frameworks to pinpoint people's motivations and help brands target their messages to move us all towards sustainable lifestyles and improved health and well-being. And with that, I'm excited to hand it over to Lindsey.
Thank you, Rosemary. I will just add that in my work, I have often worked with innovation territories that are like these ones that we're sharing with you today. And having good innovation territories makes innovation strategic and possible, frankly. So these are excellent territories that have been developed by Alice Labs, and I'm excited I get to tell you about joyful stuff. Next slide. So here are some of the attitudes and behaviors that are really underpinning this territory. Joyful stuff is really about finding joy from goods that elevate our life, but without guilt. You know, people are really wanting joyful things that enable them to do more and to get into a certain mood, but not distracting them, you know, not sort of, or taking them down emotionally. People really want stuff to improve their everyday life. And are many times looking for multi-sensorial experiences, you know, that go along with joy, but also really, again, elevate their experience. Next slide. So this opportunity currently resonates with 23% of the population of Canadians today, which is shown here beside the leading edge group. But also the 4 generations, Gen Z, Millennials, Gen X, and Boomers. But it could evolve to 43% of the population, as Rosemary mentioned, that population, consumption pool could really see this moving to be an opportunity for 43% of Canadians. And there's highest traction for this opportunity space with younger generations. So it's really a bridge to these younger generations for innovation. Next slide. So with this territory as innovators, we really need to ask ourselves, how do we make everyday activity more joyful, but not in a way that creates guilt? And this need really makes sense post-COVID. You know, we were all so deprived of, you know, our many usual sources of joy, and you know, we really are looking for joy in our lives. And this territory, while seemingly more materialistic than the other 3, is also an area of space for experimentation and digitization. So this territory really emphasizes newness and a search for innovation and freshness, and really sort of, you know, in the context of an awareness of the need for material sustainability, and also, again, really avoiding feelings of guilt that comes with many, you know, products today and single-use items that people are really trying to move away from. So next slide. I'll share a few examples that are really already out in the world, but are really proving the opportunity, you know, and bringing this opportunity space to life. So Alate is a local Vancouver Island business that's really leading the way with joy in the makeup category. They believe that curating a capsule of cruelty-free, reusable and recyclable products not only saves people the energy and money that you know, comes with cluttering up your makeup drawer with too many lipsticks that you never wear, but it also saves landfills from unnecessary waste. And in this way, this intention really creates elation. And in terms of the digitization, people are getting, you know, people getting tired of having lots of sneakers cluttering up their cupboards, can now use digital substitutes as a way to have fun, create that joy, try things on, and only buy if they've explored it and have been convinced digitally. Next slide. And my final example is also a local Vancouver area business. And this is the Lumi, which is made by Nyoka Labs. And it's a glow stick that has all the fun of single-use glow sticks, but none of the guilt of throwing something away after using it once. It also doesn't pose the risk that toxic chemicals are going to spill out while your children are using them, which can happen. Or, and also, avoids that toxic material leaching into the natural environment in a landfill. But the lack of guilt here really comes from it being able to be recharged. So once it burns out, it can be recharged and used over and over again instead of the single-use option. So next slide. Now we're going to talk about the third territory, and it's called Stuff Connecting to Nature. Next slide. So this opportunity actually ranks up in Canada compared to the other global markets. And this is really about how we connect mind and body to nature. We want to experience nature as an alternative to consuming. And I do think that's really something that's come out and people have really realized through the COVID pandemic. The COVID reality, I think, has really had us see going for a walk or being in your garden as an alternative to buying something. And also, this is about connection to nature through materials, bringing the outside in and close to the body, and having more plants in your natural environment. And people in our research also wanted to connect to the people behind brands that honor nature. So this really shows up as a desire for transparency in how things are grown or made, the material that is used, and the safety of the people who are involved in growing and making things. Next slide. So currently, this opportunity resonates with 27% of the Canadian population, but that consumption pool indicates that this could be an opportunity for up to 45% in the future, in the next 3 to 5 years. And this opportunity has less variation across the age groups, which really tells us that we are all looking for that connection to nature, regardless of our generation. Next slide. So here's some design questions for innovation with this territory. How can nature, the natural, people, and systems be a source of innovation for new types of offerings? And again, I'm going to give just a few examples that I really think bring this territory to life. Next slide. Nutshell coolers are made from coconut husks, but also, very importantly, perform better than traditional coolers made out of artificial materials. Part of their brand is also really connecting people to the Filipino farmers and the materials that are at the heart of their products. Ecologist is one of my very favorite local businesses that are doing incredible things. And the Victoria-based clothing company only uses beautiful wool and organic cotton in their classic designs. And the reason for that is because of the harmful impact of synthetic fibers and synthetic fabrics used in clothing on the ocean. And that's a result of the microfibers wearing off clothing and getting into nature. And the next and final example I'll share is about regenerative agriculture. And many brands are, including Patagonia, are investing in regenerative agriculture for their textiles. But I really wanted to give a local example and really recognize the leadership of Nature's Path. They're saying that they're going further than organic with their oatmeal. And they're committed to regenerative agriculture practices that restore the soil. And that might be growing more than one type of crop at once to create biodiversity, but also keeping root systems in the soil. And why that's important is because that really improves the biodiversity or supports the biodiversity of the ecosystems surrounding farmlands. These types of practices also happen to store more water in the soil which means we're better protecting our farmland and our soil in times of drought, which we know anyone in BC is really feeling that drought right now. So this is a win-win for nature. And oats grown in healthy soil are also more likely to transfer those nutrients to the food, and therefore provide more nutrient-dense food for us eating it, and is better for our health as well. So those are the examples for stuff connecting to nature, and I'm going to pass it back to Rosemary to talk about the final innovation territory.
Thank you so much, Lindsey. Now we have a moment to breathe and to think about flowing stuff, which is a final innovation territory I want to share with you today. Next slide, please. So flowing stuff is really this category that is about thinking about goods as part of a system with flow. And as Oskar mentioned, this is the first time we're really having people sort of an awareness of around material flows and scarce resources. And so in this category, we have innovation territory. We have people just really not wanting to feel that their consumption behaviors are pulling more into the system, not having to carry that burden of bringing more things into circulation, and saying, I prefer to optimize or to use the resources, the goods that are already in circulation. It's also about, and we did actually hear, thinking back to some of the sort of the discussions in the Hack Fest, it's really people saying, I'm not going to feel, I don't feel bad if I'm buying something secondhand or something that's upcycled because it was a product or waste regardless. So these are easy things for me to do. But then there was also interest around temporary ownership models of having access to things while you need them, as more of a positive way of approaching the effective use of resources and having those consumption approaches in your lives. And also a little bit of this interest in on-demand production and customization are seen as a way to make sure that dead stocks are minimized. Next slide. So the numbers here are quite interesting. There's two things. This is the most emergent innovation territory in Canada, and globally we actually rank down a little bit compared to global markets for flowing stuff. Currently it's 15% of the population that resonate with this, but it's growing to 40%, potentially in those 3 to 5 years for that, consumption pool. But I think one of the interesting differences here is there are significant generational differences. Older generations resonate with this less, and we see younger generations really resonating. If we look at Gen Z and millennials really kind of seeing as new ownership models and secondhand as chic and a good thing to do. So I think for brands, this is really interesting because this is an opportunity if you're seeking it for brand renewal, and to make sure that you're bringing younger customers in the door. Next slide, please. So it does lead to a bunch of design questions for innovators to think about. How can goods be seen as a flow? But in particular, how can this be done in mainstream or industrial scale ways? We heard a lot that, we've seen some of these secondhand models. We've seen some of these new ownership models happen at more kind of a niche scale, and wanting to see it be mainstream and an expectation that brands and our companies are part of making that happen. So some of the questions are, can variations of ownership models increase use of materials? How can supply be further optimized? And how can these community models, as I mentioned, be industrialized or mainstreamed? Next slide. So here are a few examples that I think bring it to light. I don't know if Blythe is here. I was just emailing with him yesterday, but this is a great example of business that was incubated here on the West Coast. That's a great example of flowing stuff. And it really is a circular baby clothing subscription model. Trado kind of curates these bundles of organic clothing that are Canadian brands, and your kids wear them until they outgrow that 0 to 3 month size. Kids go rapidly all the way up to age 2. And then the parents simply exchange them for the next size. Now, what's great about this is that what it's doing is that it's allowing people to just access those clothes where they need them, and really reducing the sort of time and mental effort to figure out, what do I do with this stuff at the end of life? Who do I pass it on to? Do I have to store it, for a while before I pass it on? So it really just a great example of flowing stuff. So thanks, Tradle and Blythe and the rest of your team. Next slide. So the next two examples that I want to share here are two examples of companies that are meeting that expectation that flowing stuff is reaching that kind of industrial or mainstream scale. So if anybody's been to IKEA, recently, their as-is sections have actually turned into circular hubs, and this provides a space to purchase items that are pre-loved, have minor damage, or are discontinued. And then if you're a family member, you can sell back the furniture in good, unmodified condition in return for a store credit. So it's really kind of taking what might have been something that happened at thrift stores or through yard sales and things like that, and taking it, you can keep the furniture flowing. You can go to stores across Canada. And here's another one with Mobile Clinic, which was actually acquired by TELUS in 2020. It's a Canadian smartphone and tablet repair store chain with over, in fact, that's not accurate. I believe it's at 120 plus locations across the country. So in the past, when you think about wanting to repair your mobile phone or purchasing something secondhand, you might go to a small repair shop that may or may not exist in your community. But with Mobile Clinic, you can visit these 121, I believe it is, stores across Canada. But if you don't happen to have one of those stores, you can trade in using their online platform, with shipping. So it's really kind of taking that, concept of the desire to keep things flowing, keep goods flowing, and not use scarce resources, and taking it from what might have been sort of smaller scale, maybe more grassroots, and taking it up to that industrial scale. Next slide. So what I hope you have seen here is that there's a circular story in each of these 4 innovation territories. And Lindsey, I'm going to ask you to jump in here too for yours if you feel like it. So for useful stuff, you can see that circular is really quite central in some key ways. I mean, design for longevity, durability, and repairability are core principles of circular design. So too is supporting responsible use through things like lifetime warranties and repair services. That's really that concept of circular concept of extending the life and maximizing the value of what already exists. And then it's also supporting end-of-life solutions like resale that reduce, as we heard, that psychological burden of even making the purchase up front, because there's a reassurance that the thing we purchased, the good that we purchased, will stay useful even after we've used it. So joyful stuff. Lindsey, are you okay? I mean, I handed over to you. We didn't talk about this in advance, but I know you've got it here. Sure. For joyful stuff, circular is not quite as central, but it creates a wonderful innovation opportunity.
Yeah, and I think the idea of just designing out guilt is such a tremendous opportunity. I think about myself as a parent and how many times I said, you cannot have glow sticks, kids, and just how incredible that there's an opportunity to replicate the experience, the joyful experience of some things that are very present in our world, but doing it in a way that is circular. I think digital substitutes, we gave the example of the kind of the Nike acquired company that's doing this, but through the research, we also heard a lot about, possibilities for virtual wardrobes that you could wear during a Zoom meeting. That means you look like you're wearing something new and exciting and joyful, but you don't actually have to buy it. But the material sustainability of it is not, you don't have to factor that in. And really this experimentation, this is such a kind of an exciting opportunity, knowing that people are really wanting joy, but also willing to try new things and looking for things that are fresh in the opportunities that companies and brands can bring. Should I keep going with stuff connecting to nature?
Sure. I mean, to me, stuff connecting nature is really like that that concept where part of it is using natural materials, which I think are part of the kind of, regenerative principle for circular design. But yeah, keep going and then I'll jump in with flowing stuff.
Sure. I mean, these are really, really the opportunity for biomimicry, the whole field. If you haven't heard of it, I would definitely, if you're with it, working on innovation, there's a whole field called biomimicry that really lays out how to mimic nature in innovation concepts. And also really that focus on, like ecologist, what are you really doing? What are you working with? What is the impact of your materials and your processes on nature? How can we not just not do harm, or avoid harm, but how can we actually look for materials and process that restore nature, that actually build it up and strengthen the resilience of it? And then that transparency. I mean, I think this is something B Corps do really well, is be very, that kind of practice of what are you doing and what is the impact and what journey are you on to improve your impact for both nature and people. And this is just underscoring that opportunity.
Thanks, Lindsey. And just finally with flowing stuff, I mean, I think this is really kind of the core territory in terms of new circular business models around sharing, reuse, and repair. To keep materials and products flowing. We're also seeing in this area kind of the really interest in secondhand goods or upcycled goods made from waste or offcuts, because they don't require bringing new things into the economic system. Next slide. So we wanted to, just before we close off and go to questions, wanted to let you know there are some offerings of what we've shared with you today is of interest. We are holding a free workshop for Van City members. It's coming soon. Reach out if you're interested. And what we're going to do is we're going to share, but also activate the innovation territories and consider what it means for the innovation agenda for your business. You can also reach out if you're seeking customized help to apply the Stuff and Flux innovation territories for your company. The Canadian C-suite went on the journey with us, and it is informing their thinking about circular and other innovation at their company. And in particular, because what it's really showing is that there's mass market potential here. If we thought circular was niche in the past, we need to get rid of that concept because it is mass market now. And any other applications you see, part of an incubator program presenting at a conference, please reach out. And with that, I will hand it back over to Lindsey, and I think we're going to have some questions. Oh, no, I'm handing it back over to Alice. My apologies.
All right. As I said in the chat before, if you have any questions, please include them in the chat. If we can either ask them on your behalf or you can unmute to ask them. I'm also going to spotlight Oskar to add him in here as well. But in the meantime, there is a question for Oskar. Can you give some examples of how Stuff and Flux has been applied in the past to give us an idea of the impacts this most recent research might have?
Yeah, sure. So I think this round is still fairly recent, but I can talk a little bit about that. But I will also mention that the first round that was made in 2016, we had there was like a global fashion brand, a global furniture brand, and a couple of other brands. So, and this wasn't the only reason why they did certain things, but this certainly was an ignition for one of the companies investing significantly more in their second-hand model, which was quite early in 2016. The fashion brand actually developed a totally new brand that was within the category of like the new basic, new durable basic clothing. Again, not necessarily only because of this project, but it kind of still ignited that. It's basically a totally new brand for this massive global fashion company. But now for the most recent round, I think overall, I think the discussions we are having with the brands that we have been involved in is just a realization that circularity is not something you do internally with your own processes and trying to get efficiencies or thinking through those. It's actually a offer. it needs to kind of go beyond the company into the market, and it needs to be about market making in a totally different way than before, which also means that these are big systemic changes. So I don't actually think that the clients for this round will have anything kind of ready like that. And so I can say that this is what they did. It's a long journey where there are small steps towards something that is quite completely different. Another outcome of this journey has been, which also on a national level in Finland, there has been a realization that circularity is not about processes, it's about the market, it's about how we are viewing an international market and how we are developing new offerings. So actually on a state level, there's been initiated a program for circular design where there's an invitation for 50 companies to take part in this program that is funded by the state to develop capabilities in circular design. And this project was kind of a part of the starting point for that as well. So yeah, that's some of the thoughts on that.
I think we definitely need to boost our capabilities for circular design in Canada as well. So I'm really taking note of that, and we'll be following and connecting with you on how it goes in your part of the world, Oskar.
Yeah, and I love the point about market making. Circularity is now about market making. It's just really stood out. I'm wondering, before we go to breakout groups, if there are questions from the audience about the methodology.
Yes. Rosemary, I was just about to say that. So we do have a question from Francis asking, what role will farmers and policymakers play in the conversation about the circular economy? And Francis is joining us from Nigeria.
Great question. Oskar, do you want to take that one to start?
No, you take it.
I think
I can comment on the policy making. Yes, I think that I think all of the discussions that I'm involved in right now is pinpointing on the systemic nature of this change. So this is really about, it's not about individual companies are not going to be able to make this change. So this is a dialogue and a common challenge for all kinds of institutions in the society. And I think that's where, like, what I feel like progressive nations that are fairly coherent in terms of how they are working. I'm thinking about Finland, I'm thinking about Canada and so on. I think these are the nations where there are really the potential to bring together different parties to kind of almost make this change happen. So it's all about policy making. It's all about also regulations, but it's also about commercial opportunity and about commercial players taking the challenge of scaling these opportunities to an industrial scale. So then I think the question about the farmer is too specific for me to comment. Of course, it's a part of but we haven't studied that.
I can chime in on that. I do think we're really starting to see that farmers have been completely underappreciated in their value to and their essential services that they're providing, really to steward the land and to be transitioning or to be doubling down on some of these nature farming ways of creating materials. And I think funding needs to be going to support more farmers to be growing regeneratively. But I think also farmers are going to become the storytellers. They're going to be the ones that brands need to build relationships with to be able to tell us how is, what they're growing going to be, having a positive impact, and how can brands buy the crops that are having the positive impact, not just the monocrop, or kind of the crops that maybe are having a negative impact on ecosystems. So that's my vision. I would welcome if anyone else has examples to share, but I really think we need to be thinking about funding farmers, as well as building relationships with them as storytellers and part of the brand as partners.
Great. I think that we are going to start shifting to our breakout rooms part, which will essentially give everyone in the audience the opportunity to ask more questions from our panelists more directly around the innovation territory. So I'm just going to reshare my screen briefly. All right. First off, thank you to Oskar, Lindsey, and Rosemary for sharing your time and expertise today. We, as I said, we're going to shift into our breakout rooms. Each breakout room will have a facilitator and a note taker from our teams. We will have 2 breakout rooms, one facilitated by Rosemary and Oskar and one by Lindsey. In these meeting rooms, we will discuss the following questions, which I'm now going to paste into the chat. First, what have you observed in the market, your own business, or through other innovation market research that supports the 4 innovation territories? And the second question, what barriers do you see to using the innovation territories to inform your innovation agenda? We will be following Chatham House rules, so we welcome everyone to share candidly in these spaces. After the meeting, you can bring up points that people spoke to, but we ask that you do not attribute it to them directly. I'm just going to bring up the breakout rooms now. Oh, sorry, lost my controls there for a second. I am going to open them up now. You'll see a prompt on your screen to join. And if you don't see the prompt, I'm going to stay here to make sure that you get into the room that you need. We'll be coming back at 10:15.